Hi, everyone, this is the Encyclopedia channel. The book that this program interprets for you is Who's Pulling Your Strings? The author of this book, Harriet Brick, is an American clinical psychologist and management consultant. In nearly 30 years of clinical experience, she has come into contact with a large number of patients who are troubled by interpersonal relationships and have serious psychological problems. Some of them are chronically miserable, depressed, and in a constant cycle of stress. See a psychiatrist until you find that you are completely in the hands of others, like a marionette at the mercy of others. So how do we recognize manipulative behavior in interpersonal interactions? How can I get rid of being manipulated and regain control of my own life? After listening to this episode, you will understand. Based on his many years of clinical experience, the author once wrote a book called Pleasing Disorder, and put forward the word pleasing disorder, mainly talking about why some people habitually like to be a good old man. Go to the website, hoping to have more exchanges with some habitual people pleasers. As a result, more people asked for help in the message area of the website. The author found that people pleasers are not the only group who are easily manipulated. Manipulation is far more frequent than we thought, and the manipulation process is hidden, like contracting a chronic disease. There is an incubation period, and it is difficult for you to detect it at first. Even as a psychiatrist, she has experienced firsthand the enormous damage that being manipulated can do to her self-esteem, emotional and mental health. Therefore, the author realized that it is necessary to develop a set of methods to resist manipulation, to help more people realize their own weaknesses, how to fall into a manipulative relationship, and most importantly, to really know what they are, what to do to get out of a manipulative relationship. It can be said that this book is a guide for avoiding pits and self-help. Next, we will divide it into two parts and interpret this book for you. Part 1, how exactly did the manipulation happen? In the second part, we have to figure out who are the easy targets for manipulators. Once manipulated, what should be done to get rid of this relationship completely? First part. First, let's talk about how exactly does manipulation happen. Before officially answering this question, let's take a look. What are some people who like to manipulate others? There is one type of people you must have thought of. They usually have clear goals, and they will never give up until they reach their goals, and they behave very strong. In fact, what is really worth noting is the second type of people, who don't even know that they are manipulating others. So what exactly are these people? The author lists many personality traits in the book, including borderline personality disorder, dependent personality disorder, and so on. Let's briefly talk about it. For example, people with borderline personality disorder often change their self-cognition and emotions, and are afraid of being abandoned. They mainly manipulate by arousing the negative emotions of the other party. Simply put, I'm going to make it hard for you if things don't go my way. Just imagine if there is such a person who expects you very high by your side, who imagines you perfectly. Do you have to think before and after every word you say, and if you don't give him enough care and sense of security, he will immediately turn his face and finally apologize to you. Before you know it, you will make your actions and words go in the direction he expects. The most difficult thing to deal with, the one who scratches the heart, isn't it the moody person? Another example is people with another type of dependent personality disorder. They usually have an excessive need to be cared for, so once you get along with them for a long time, you will find that they depend on you for everything, from what they eat to what job they find. Moreover, once rejected, they will start to show that they are helpless and need you especially, otherwise life is hopeless. Just imagine, if you really get along like this for a long time, you must feel tired. But if you leave him alone, you will feel very guilty. Can't afford to provoke such a person, can we still not hide? Some people say that in life, we should avoid these people as much as possible. It really doesn't work. Because the author found that the difficulty of this matter is that sometimes we can't choose whether we want to contact them, such as the original family, company colleagues, or mentor bosses, etc. What's more, the manipulator's manipulation methods are often hidden under layers of lies, and it is difficult to detect even if they have close contact at the beginning. Usually their words are, I do this because I care about you, love you, and use it to show that I think about you. For example, I tell you this because I have more experience in this area to reflect my professionalism. Another example, I tell you what to do because this is my obligation, which means personal responsibility. Anyway, in the process of communication, even if you have slight doubts about them, they will try their best to dispel your doubts, and the final result will make you feel that you doubt him, which is a bit unreasonable, and you will feel guilty and compensated. So how did the manipulation happen? There are a lot of things in this book, but in fact they fall into these three categories. The first type of negative reinforcement is the coercion and temptation, until you do the behavior I expect. The second type of positive reinforcement is to give you some small sweets at the beginning, and continue to lure you to do small things. You've done a good job, and I promise you a more enticing reward that will take a long time to pay. It seems that this reward is within reach, and you work hard, but in the end you will find that this is simply a blank check. In fact, we can think of these two categories. The most interesting is the third category, called intermittent reinforcement. Let's talk about a joke first. You must have heard it, how to pursue a girl. It's really not sending flowers, but writing love letters to her every day, and after a period of time, suddenly you stop writing. At this time, girls must feel uncomfortable and wonder what happened in their hearts, and then they will start to enter your thoughts and try to figure out your thoughts. Although this is just a story, there is a rigorous scientific basis behind it. This intermittent reinforcement method, the most important thing is to change the frequency and predictability of behavior after breaking the continuous positive reinforcement. Changing continuous and predictable reinforcement into intermittent, partial, random, and unpredictable, thus affecting the feelings of the manipulated person towards the manipulator. Over time, the manipulated person can become addicted to the feeling. We use a set of experiments to specifically explain the effect of this intermittent reinforcement. The scientists put two pigeons in separate cages and taught them to poke a lever with their beaks, and then use the lever to fill a trough with food. In order to control variables, one of the pigeons, we call it pigeon A, was placed in the control group for continuous positive reinforcement. When pigeon A entered the cage, it had been hungry for a while. He pecked around in the cage until he happened to poke the lever out of curiosity and the feed was delivered to the trough. Because the goal of the scientists is to let the pigeons learn to poke the lever, so by poking once and giving food once, such a steady and continuous rhythm can quickly cultivate the habit of poking the lever. Next, let's look at pigeon B in the experimental group. Its life in the cage was initially the same as pigeon A. After about 10 sessions of sustained positive reinforcement, it got into the habit of poking the lever. At this time, the scientists suddenly changed the rules of the game, and they gradually lengthened the interval between each supply of food. For example, pigeon B may poke the lever for 3 times but have no food, and the 4th time it has food again. For example, after poking the lever 6 times, there is no food, but it has food again for the 7th time. Then start serving food in a completely random way at certain times when the pigeon pokes the lever. The point is that this result is unpredictable. In order to demonstrate the effects of continuous reinforcement and intermittent reinforcement, the scientists decided not to provide any food to the 2 pigeons. It was then calculated how long the pigeons continued to poke the lever without any positive reinforcement. Because there is no pay or reward, scientists see the behavior as compulsive. In the end, pigeon A lasted only a short time, because it had been able to poke the lever to get food every time before, so it was easier for it to understand that the good thing was over, slow down quickly, and eventually stop poking the lever. Pigeon B, however, continued to poke the lever without any reward until exhaustion. Because it doesn't know that the intermittent food has become no food, it is unpredictable. Moreover, pigeon 2 has become addicted to the behavior of poking the lever, just like the manipulated person who has become accustomed to intermittent reinforcement and always has hope for the manipulator in his heart. The author mentioned that in the case she came into contact with, there was a woman who had been in a manipulative relationship for a long time, could no longer control her feelings, and her work life was a mess. At the beginning of the relationship, every time she behaved in a way that his lover expected, the guy would say something sweet or buy her a gift to show his love. However, she found that the longer the time spent together, even though she still loves each other as always, the boys showed less and less positive feedback, and the emotional changes were unpredictable. Sometimes, boys will be indifferent, and sometimes, they will suddenly buy gifts for this woman, saying that he loves her very much, and so on. You see, this intermittent reinforcement method is really the most tortured. Compared with continuous reinforcement, intermittent reinforcement will bring more anxiety and stress to the person being manipulated. It can be said that it is this uncertainty that nourishes endless anxiety and stress. However, to form a manipulative relationship, there must be at least two people. Although in a manipulative relationship, the manipulated person will experience a lot of negative emotions such as pressure and anxiety, but in fact, they often ignore that they are also in this relationship. Collaborators. Every obedience of the manipulated is actually continuously positively reinforcing the behavior of the manipulator. Therefore, only when the manipulated person really changes himself, instead of trying to change the manipulator, is the key to unlocking this relationship. The second part. Next, in the second part, let's figure out who are easy targets for manipulators. Once manipulated, what should be done to get rid of this relationship completely? The author found that the targets targeted by manipulators will inadvertently reveal some common weaknesses in their personalities. These people may be kind, may be easily influenced by others, or may be undergoing major life changes, such as job hunting, promotion, etc. Lovelorn, marriage, these unstable periods. In general, it can be summarized into these three aspects. First, excessive emphasis on others. Second, excessive neglect of oneself. Third, excessive sensitivity to negative emotions. Let's explain them one by one. First, the excessive emphasis on others can be manifested in the following characteristics: having the habit and tendency to please others, obsessed with gaining the approval and acceptance of others, often not knowing how to reject others. Most people of this type are used to doing more things that others think are good, even if sometimes these things need to be premised on sacrificing their own interests. Because in their hearts, it is more important to be liked and recognized by others. Once they reject someone, they feel guilty and immediately think, "Am I being so selfish?" Second, the excessive ignorance of oneself can be manifested in the following characteristics. Self-awareness is vague. There is no clear understanding of one's own identity and personality, often disbelief in one's own judgment and reaction, and that most things in life are caused by other people or external factors, not within one's control. Some people of this type have a vague sense of self due to bad childhood experiences. Some people tend to use other people's suggestions to support the decision-making process. They think that by asking more people's suggestions, they can minimize the possibility of making mistakes, but they just don't realize that this decision-making method itself is a mistake. Third, hypersensitivity to negative emotions can manifest itself in the fact that they are willing to do whatever it takes to avoid conflict or confrontation in interpersonal interactions, including of course agreeing to the demands of the manipulator. For example, if a manipulator raises his or her voice, suggesting that a conflict is on the verge of breaking out, they may feel anxious. Even if they are not face to face, they will imagine in their hearts the appearance of the two arguing. So there is no way but to give in to the demands of the manipulators, and what's worse, the more they want to avoid negative emotions, the more they can't avoid them, and their bottom line will get lower and lower. In fact, negative emotions are built into human nature, which means that all people are biologically angry when they are violated. It is neither worthwhile nor possible to avoid negativity completely. Trying to hide, feign, or chronically suppress anger leads to a less healthy state of being than an outburst of conflict. Do you think it is not stressful to always compromise in order not to have conflicts? So how do you get out of a manipulative relationship? In the book, the author summarizes the 7-step resistance strategy, which is very detailed, and each step is detailed in what stage, how to do it, and how to say it. In order to make it easier for everyone to understand and remember, we have integrated the method provided by the author into a formula called 1 drag, 2 patience, 3 breaks, 4 stand. These steps are gradual and mutually reinforcing. The more steps we take to resist manipulators, the stronger the resistance will be. Procrastination refers to the first step. Don't immediately agree to the manipulator's request, delay the time first. The key point in the early stage is that there must be some time between the manipulator's request and your own response. Even if you don't think about it, you have to allow time to break the bad habit of automatically complying with the manipulator's request. In the first round, communicate with the manipulator on the phone as much as possible, and strive for some short-term breathing opportunities. When the manipulator makes a request, you can find a reason to say, I still have something to do here, I have to leave first, sorry. An urgent call, or to grab something from the office, get a cup of coffee or water, etc. Just take a few minutes to get yourself out of that environment. As for the manipulators, they will definitely oppose your procrastination. They will put pressure on you by raising their voices, showing a tendency to get angry, nagging, indifference, etc., and arouse your guilt. So, on the second round, when the manipulator repeats the previous request again, you can show that you have heard and understood him. You can just say, I know you'll be surprised or angry, but I really need some time to think about it, and I'll come to you when I do. All that's left to do is to treat yourself as a repeater and repeat the previous step over and over again. Even if the manipulator is very angry and blames you, remember not to apologize. It is your right to repeat that expressing yourself takes time to consider, hang up or just leave after saying goodbye. Here I want to emphasize that during the whole process, never explain to the manipulator why you need time to think, what to think about, and don't explain when you will respond. Watch out, if you start talking too much, you will lose control. Procrastination is the strategy of the whole process. No matter how you or the other person feels, don't engage in debate or fight. The manipulator may have controlled you for a long time, but you are not a puppet, you are a self-aware being, and now you have decided to cut the strings that manipulate you. The author proposes that the best way to practice this method is to write the script yourself and prepare hard. You'll find that writing down the scripts that are likely to play out in your life can help you prepare and increase your control. After so many previous encounters with a manipulator, you know for sure what the manipulator will say if you say no. You just write it down and get someone you trust to practice role-playing with you. As you practice, focus on your posture, eye contact, voice smoothness, volume and pitch, and overall presentation. With practice, you can better gauge where the boundaries are for you. The more you practice exposing yourself to stressful situations, the better prepared you will be before the actual practice. The next step is the most critical. Second tolerance means that you must tolerate certain negative emotions that are very uncomfortable. At this stage, the negative emotions on both sides will reach their peak, but as long as you get over it, the situation with the manipulator will change clearly. Because so far, the fuse for negative sentiment on both sides has been too short. The result is that once the manipulator shows anger, it ignites your anxiety, fear, or guilt, which then spreads immediately, triggering a cycle of submission that reinforces the manipulation. Then you say I endure. How can you judge how long you can endure? Enduring until he became anxious first, he stopped talking all at once. This feeling is a bit similar, for example, after you hear the words if you don't agree, we will break up, or if you insist on not listening to me, we will sever the mother-daughter relationship, you almost know it. If this situation was put in the past, your reaction mechanism must have automatically adjusted to an emergency state, just like a 3-level fire suddenly broke out. But, in reality, a state of emergency doesn't really exist. This sense of urgency comes from the atmosphere of terror created by the manipulator and your oversensitivity to negative emotions. Even if you don't immediately appease the anxieties, fears, and guilt that your manipulator has caused you, the result is far from self-destructive. However, what specific methods should be adopted to get along with these negative emotions? After all, it is difficult to relax in a situation that seems urgent to us. The authors suggest that habituation exercises are the best way to counteract these negative emotions. The specific way is, first of all, we need to recall at least 3 scenes, use the fresh memory in your mind, write down each example in detail, and pay special attention to describing the language and behavior that make you feel uncomfortable. At the same time, describe your own fears, anxieties, and guilt at that time in as much detail as possible. Then, read it all into the recording device. The purpose of doing this is to restore that experience of anxiety, fear, or guilt. Next, you can choose an environment in which you can relax. For example, lie on a comfortable sofa, put the prepared tape recorder by your side, take a deep breath first, focus on your arms and legs while breathing, and focus on this thought, my arms and legs are changing. It's warm and heavy. After 2 to 3 minutes of relaxed breathing, you can start listening to the first recording. Continue to take deep breaths throughout the process, while feeling the relaxation of the limbs, while clearly reproducing the scene in my heart, trying to get along with those negative emotions. After the first recording is over, keep the reenacted scene firmly in mind. Then say to yourself, I do feel uncomfortable, but I can actually live with them. Combine this relaxation with a habitual practice of reenacting situations to allow yourself to confront and free yourself from hypersensitivity to negative emotions. The authors suggest completing the exercises at least twice a day for a period of 1 to 2 weeks. Because in the process of actually dealing with a manipulator, they apply pressure through various means, just to try to evoke those feelings of anxiety, guilt, and fear that you are familiar with by now. The 3 breaks refer to labeling the manipulator's behavior, turning his conspiracy into a conspiracy, and directly breaking the manipulative relationship. Now that we have passed the peak of negative emotions, it is time to pierce this layer of window paper. In a manipulative relationship, as long as your tacit agreement with the manipulator remains unchanged, neither does the power to manipulate. So, at this time, you need to fight back with direct language. You can tell the manipulator exactly what he did and how you felt about it. At this point, most manipulators will choose to take a step back in the process of pressing every step because they have been punched through the window paper. What if you still feel like you can't clearly describe the manipulator's behavior, or if you really want to go to a face-to-face scene, don't know how to say it? The author gives a specific speech content, which can be broken down into such 4+1 sentences. First, list his manipulative behavior. What do you feel? Is there a better alternative? If he uses this method, what are your feelings? As an example, let's say a wife is so manipulated by her husband that she can say, when you raise your voice and yell at me, I feel scared and anxious. If you can stop yelling and use a calm voice, say what you need, and I feel respected. Have you noticed that in the first 4 sentences, you still did not agree to his request, nor did you reject his request, but just clearly stated his manipulation methods? The purpose of saying this is to explain your emotional reaction. At least this time he knows in his heart that you are serious, so you first pass the ball back to the manipulator to judge whether his manipulative behavior is conscious or not. Unconscious, willing to change. If you are unwilling to change, you know it directly, he did this to make you feel these negative emotions. Therefore, you can use the last killer sentence to label him and express your attitude. You can just say to him, I know what you want me to do, but your threats don't work anymore. The final step, standing up, refers to re-establishing the boundaries of your relationship. Because you have done so much before, it is to set your own terms, to clarify what you are willing and unwilling to do in your relationship, and to tell the manipulator what methods are effective and what methods are unacceptable to you. Then we can jointly discuss a way that is acceptable to both parties. However, at this point, you have to be mentally prepared, that is, the manipulator only wants to continue this relationship in his own way, that is, your relationship can only be established if he has the final say. In a practical sense, your appeal becomes a test paper for testing the value of this relationship. If you find that the manipulator's sole purpose in maintaining the relationship is to continue his manipulation and exploitation, then you must make up your mind that leaving is the best choice. And, even if the manipulator shows a willingness to change, we can't expect the relationship to correct itself overnight. Manipulators need time to learn new ways of behaving and better ways of expressing their needs. But your patience, persistence, and determination can bring new hope. In the previous content, we have carefully analyzed step by step how to get rid of manipulation. Now, let's review it. We talked about a mantra: 1 delay, 2 tolerance, 3 breaking, for standing. First procrastinate, then practice tolerating negative emotions. After the most difficult period of time, labeling the manipulator directly breaks your relationship and finally reestablishes a boundary. Behind every step, it must be accompanied by a lot of role-playing exercises and strong preparation. Finally, we still have a long-term and arduous task, that is, to improve self-growth. What we need to spend a lot of time on is to clear out those viruses in our cognition, find out our soft persimmon thinking, and make ourselves really tough. In the book, for each of the weaknesses we mentioned earlier, the author gives a version of soft thinking and a corrected hard thinking version. We strongly recommend that you keep these in your notebook, read them often, or when you feel anxious, saying it aloud will definitely help you a lot in relieving yourself of negative emotions. I picked a sentence from the book and read it to everyone first. For example, the soft persimmon thinking is, When others ask for it, I should do what he expects me to do to make them happy. And the corrected hard thinking is, I know that I can't please everyone and make everyone happy, which is impossible and unrealistic. I want other people to like me for my personal qualities, not for what I do for them. The author also lists a lot of self-test questions and some typical cases he has encountered in this book. If you are interested, I recommend you to read the original book. In fact, have you noticed that the reason why manipulation can happen, in most cases, is because we care too much about other people's feelings, because we are afraid of being left out, rejected, or even hated. However, Adler, the founder of individual psychology, once said, being hated itself is a kind of courage. This is a part that a person must experience in the process of growing up, and it is also a necessary condition for becoming a strong person. Your own life, no one but you says it. This is the end of this episode of the show. What do you think about it differently? Welcome to leave a message to discuss with everyone. Hey, if you like our channel, please subscribe us. Haha, remember to like it.